you, or you can interview me.
Can we just have a moment of sympathy, because nobody should ever have to go on after Laura, right? Because that was not only awesome and like nutrient rich, right? Like just very dense with information and things we all need to know. So now we have the unenviable task of trying to follow that. So my name is Andrew Rosenman. I'm the Vice President of Global and Audio for a firm called WideOrbit, which some of you know, some of you hopefully will know. And I'm excited to be speaking with Paul, who is the Chief Business Officer of EXCO. So tell us who EXCO is.
Okay, so I am the Chief Business Officer. So EXCO is a company that's been around for a while. It started actually as an online company helping publishers build products, video content, games, polls, and 4 or 5 years ago, they migrated solely into the video space, and we essentially built a video player, a video CMS, and a video ad server that works with hundreds of different online publishers. We provide all of the infrastructure, personalization, we help them manage all of their video content, and probably the distinguishing feature of our platform is we help manage all of the programmatic video advertising for these online customers. So we help them optimize it. We can talk about how that's done. And then in the last year, we've expanded into CTV and digital out of home with only one component of that platform, which is our ad server, which does the same thing, the yield optimization piece, but it does it for different customers, obviously.
Okay, so we probably should have set this up. This conversation will be about advertising, so we're in the ad tech space.
We can talk about other things.
We could. I want to actually take a moment to play out something we just heard regarding programmatic CPMs. And I know that you're in the business of optimizing the yield that publishers get for their inventory in a programmatic marketplace. Is that right?
That's the main thing I would say that drives the value for the publishers. The core reason that they partner with us is, once we convince them that we can do this, is that they will see improvement on their yield through increased fill rate or increased CPMs. And it's basically, if you go to an online publisher, 4 or 5 years ago, and it even exists today, they'll typically have people in their digital departments whose title is yield optimization of some kind, or yield or ad ops. And those people historically have been doing a lot of these things, working with a variety of different demand partners manually. They might place different programmatic seats in different places. They might think about pricing manually. And what's really happened is in the online space particularly, and it's happening now in CTV, is the whole value chain has become incredibly complex. And so when you're working in a very sophisticated programmatic world where you've got SSPs and DSPs, and you have data providers, and you have curation companies, and you just add to the list, you have a lot of complexity. And you have thousands of different advertising bids coming through. Some of it's direct, some of it's programmatic, and the question is how do you optimize for that and make the mechanics of that work better on behalf of the publisher? And that is where the platform that we've built, and obviously it's not a static platform, it's constantly being optimized itself, but that is where we come in and sit as a layer for the publisher so that we can work harder for them. Because a lot of the stuff historically, other than their manual people doing this, are people on the other side, doing good work. The question is like, how do you provide more value for the actual content publisher themselves?
Well, I think we just heard from Laura that it seems that some of the power, or at least Wall Street believes that some of the power or the pricing power is moving to the publisher side, away from what used to be on the buy side, given the decline in dominant DSP players' stock. So you're working on the sell side.
Right.
And I'm going to ask the uncomfortable question. Is all the programmatic mishigas in between the buyer and the seller necessary? By the way, that's German.
It's mishigas.
No, just kidding. Anyway.
First of all, I think there's a real value to what's happening on the buy side. You've got, if you break it down, on any given publisher, let's just say there could be, 5, 10, 15 different types of demand sources, right? SSPs, companies who are, DSPs, there could be companies who sell a different type of product for your vertical, resellers. And I think that, so on the one hand, there are different sources and there are different elements to that demand that come through, and so you need that. And I think it can be incremental, right? So on the one hand, you've got the publisher. If you're big enough, you probably have your own direct ad sales team, great. You've got connections into DSPs, great. They provide distinguishing demand depending on who they are. And then the SSPs also, they have their own ad sales teams, and they're not all redundant to one another. So, you have to figure out, one, how much complexity do you want to have for your own business? And then two, how do you make sense of that mechanically so that it provides, I guess, effectiveness for your supply?
I think it's funny. I think we scared Jeff Spence from Magnite out of the room with the last session because oh, good. Oh, good. He's here. So you're not going to like this.
He's on the next panel with me, I think.
Which is good. I got to ask then, how does an SSP, because this is, having worked in the field.
Sure.
Should an SSP sort of appear, right, be a source of demand?
Versus what?
Versus a DSP who are representing the needs of the actual brand, the buyer, the performance marketer. So it seems that there's this amplification of, I had a conversation, you'll appreciate this, out there on the patio. Someone who's here, just onboarded a new publisher. And the minute they open them up, 60 million bid requests per hour, and nested inside of that was a multiplier of 7.
Right.
So 420 million bid requests per hour the minute they open them up. It's implausible there are that many placements. So then multiply that by all these numbers of intermediaries. I'm sorry, Jeff, I have to ask these questions because I actually want an answer.
Well,
Does this help, or is this just plumbing for the sake of plumbing?
I think there's probably two sides to this. So if I don't want to speak for Jeff, but first of all, if you're Magnite, you provide other forms of value. So first of all, you have a very big ad sales team, right?
True.
And so that is not easy to differentiate if you're a strategic SSP, however you want to define it. So big ad sales team has an ad server, right, for direct and many other capabilities. Some of them even may even overlap with some of the things we do, like with mediation. But anyway, there's a whole, I would say, a layer of value there that's partly ad sales and revenue generation and partly platform capabilities. I think there probably are pockets of opportunity with other types of SSPs, and the question is like, how do you, if you layer in continued complexity from many different partners, as a publisher, you shouldn't just assume that you can integrate all of these discrete sources of demand and see it flow through, because things are going to happen to your supply, right? You're going to have timeouts. You're going to have data that may not flow through properly. You might have ad bids that are not aligned. And so I think the more complexity you create in terms of the demand sources, the more likely it is that you're going to be shoving stuff into your supply that's going to create complexity operationally. And I think, again, like that's where we're trying to solve a need. I'm not saying that because, like, okay, definitely need XCO, but I think there's value with the SSPs. The question is how to leverage it and optimize it for success.
Okay, for the record, I'm a fan of both Magnite and SpotX that came before. Like, I understand they provide value. I'm trying to get to the bottom of, we just heard that some of this is going to be all these intermediation layers, right?
Right.
Maybe collapsing based on what we just heard, that the money is going to get spent at an $8 CPM on a performance metric versus all these data layers and enrichment and all this other stuff that gets piled on.
Like
so
a race to the bottom, you're saying.
Well,
right,
no,
right.
but I don't think it's the bottom. I think it's the race to the actual value,
Right.
is what we heard. So if I'm selling something, I want to spend as much as it needs to sell something. But help us understand how you sit next to the publisher's ad stack. You're not in their ad stack.
No, we're in the ad stack.
Okay.
So we're sitting side by side with somebody like SpringServe or Magnite. In the online world, we're there's GAM, right? So there's Google, and we're sitting side by side with GAM, helping to mediate the programmatic advertising that's coming in for the publisher, and we're integrated with those publishers, and we're helping the publisher almost. I mean, think of it as not a replacement, but a supplemental technology platform that sits as an overlay that helps them take all of those demands, those programmatic demand sources, and allow them to better compete. So adding things like dynamic pricing so that the publisher doesn't have to do that themselves. Smart bid selection. So for example—
What's that?
You could have a piece of inventory, and you could get a bid for $20. Let's just say a 30-second spot is $20, and you're also seeing at the same time that there are two 15-second bids coming in that are less money in aggregate, and you've decided from a technology perspective, you've decided that you're actually going to take the lower CPM in aggregate because you know that you can place that $20 CPM somewhere else. And so what you're creating is more bid density and more effectiveness of where that demand goes.
So the revenue per second calculations you're doing for the publisher,
Correct.
Or their ad stack is doing?
We're doing for the publisher.
Okay, but their ad stack is doing some of that also. Is there some contention there?
No, I mean, I don't think so, because I think it's about just how the direct and the programmatic sit side by side and essentially, compete against one another.
I mean, I'm still sort of stuck on what we just heard, that programmatic demand is going to sort of change, right, and shift, and it may not be as rich as it has been. What are you? Let me ask, because I think it's interesting for this audience to hear. What are the trends over 2025 that you've seen sitting inside of some of these ad stacks? Where is the qualified best demand coming from? Who are the emerging players to help publishers, networks stay alive and earn and remain viable?
It's probably a longer discussion. I think, so I'll say this about the online world that's been sort of historically our bread and butter business. We don't see price pressure on programmatic CPMs. We actually see them increasing because of things that we can help them with. We've just entered in the last year into CTV, and it's very interesting because a lot of the discussions with a network or a channel in that space, it's always first sort of inclination is, can you bring us incremental demand? Because many of them, mid-sized channels, not the biggest ones, their whole business is predicated on programmatic, right? And so I think there's a question, they're sitting on all of these integrations, and they need help probably getting more direct in. So I think this is an early stage situation in the CTV world where they're becoming more sophisticated about how to build a direct business. And then of course they're trying to figure out how do I get more out of our supply.
So 80-20 rule. Any given publisher has half a dozen or more sort of demand partners or supply connections. Arguably, how many do they really need? If you're a CTV publisher, and by the way, we should qualify that CTV is a very different beast than the online world. So what does a publisher really need? 2, 4, Jeff plus
right.
4?
It's probably also dependent on your size, right? I think, if you have 4 or 5, but you've been discerning about who those are based on your audience and your channel, then it's probably sufficient to start. I would say that, if I were a small or a mid-sized publisher and you're starting out, one is if you're gonna go venture into this programmatic world, start small, figure out how to make your data connections work, build slowly, incrementally, versus just sort of, creating 5 to 10 partnerships with programmatic partners.
Right. Okay, so this is the one tough question I'll toss you. So the one thing I learned is that you should not sell on audience, you should sell on content, which is what we heard just a little while ago. Agree, disagree with the 30 seconds we have left?
I think you can sell on both. I mean, I don't know why you have to pick. First of all, I'm not an expert in direct ad sales per se, but I think you have to figure out what your value proposition and your point of differentiation is, and then figure out, first of all, direct advertising is very expensive, which is why you don't see a lot of smaller players do it, because the salespeople are expensive, account management, marketing, all of the things that are associated with it, it's very hard to scale quickly. And if you're in market, you have to figure out how can I get people's attention? And if you have an audience and you have a point of differentiation that's somewhat unique, then you have to figure out, which verticals do I want to go after? What's my strategy? What would get people's attention that could create value for that brand or for that consumer? And I wouldn't distinguish between audience or content per se. I think it's probably case dependent.
That was the most political answer you could have given. Thank you.
That's the way I can end
I appreciate
this
it. No,
conversation.
it's awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you all.